Phil, thanks for joining us. Our little space on this podcast talking Wrexham, but also the fact that 1,000 competitive games as a manager you've achieved so far, and you're still going strong. And at this moment in time, you're probably having the best time ever.
Yeah, it's certainly enjoying my time at Wrexham. It's been a fantastic experience since day one, challenging at the start, but backed by great owners and a lot of good people at the club. And it's been really enjoyable to not just see the team progress, but the whole area be uplifted.
Did it take much convincing for you to, because it was National League to start with, wasn't it? And you were very much a league manager.
Yeah, at the time, obviously, because, like you say, just left Sunderland and I'd never managed in the National League before, and I didn't know a lot about the league. And people say football's football, but it's important to understand the level you're going into. So that was always a gamble. But when I spoke to the owners, went through the plans in more detail going forward, I couldn't resist coming on board and thought, to be part of something, to build a club back up, because obviously 15 years out of the EFL and the hurt and the pain, the supporters and the whole area had, to take the responsibility to try and be the man to bring the club back into the league was a great challenge I couldn't turn down.
With the opportunities before Wrexham and in the clubs that you'd worked, and when you make those decisions to take on a project or a team, does gut feeling have a lot to do with it? Intuition have a lot to do with it?
Yeah, I think you've got to weigh up everything in when you're decided on your next club. And I speak to a lot of managers, when managers are out of work, and it's a big call because sometimes managers can wait too long to go back in, and then they almost get forgotten. Sometimes people jump in too quickly at the first opportunity, and it's not the right one. So it's a careful balance to strike. But I think the key for me was, speaking to the owners and understanding their overall ambitions and passion for the club and the area, why they bought the club, and looking at the history of the club and the size of the catchment area, the potential, but also how much the club means to the people of Wrexham. So weighing up everything, I thought, wow, what a great opportunity, and it's turned out well so far.
I know when they talk about longevity and management, and you'll know with the managers that you speak to, that managers don't get much time these days, do they, in any particular club, especially lower down in the leagues. Did you think you'd still be here after that initial phone call all those years ago?
Well, I mean, when I came in, the plan was to be part of the journey for an extended period of time, because obviously the owners and myself, the aim was not just to get into Division 2, it was, can we keep improving and keep climbing the leagues. But of course, as you know, there's many pitfalls along the way as a manager, and at the start it didn't really go all our own way. But I think up to Christmas in the first year, that pre-season, the COVID hit pre-season, disrupted me getting to know the players. I look back at that and I think we did well to still be in contention with the players we had available. And it wasn't until the January where we were able to add a few additions to strengthen the squad up.
It's a different type of player though here, isn't it? I suppose because of the spotlight that's on a League One club as it is at this moment in time, the type of player that you bring here obviously has to be a good player, but what extra characteristics does that person have to have?
I think we've brought players in who are used to having the expectation of winning and the demands at clubs before, and being part of promotion campaigns, because there is expectations here at Wrexham and you've got to be able to handle that. And also players who will enjoy the kind of exposure the club gets outside of football, but be able to separate that from the most important thing, which is training well and playing at your maximum when you're selected. So yeah, we look long and hard about the characters we look to recruit, and I feel that's taken us a long way, getting a strong dressing room of good lads who understand what the club's all about and have represented and wore the jersey the right way.
Has that always been your kind of dressing room at the clubs that you've been in before? Sunderland, Hull, Bolton, Colchester. Have you always looked for that dressing room strength?
Yeah, I think football doesn't change. People think it does, but you need good characters, reliability. in your group, because throughout the course of the season you're going to have defeats, you're going to have players going to be left out the team. It's never kind of completely plain sailing. Even in promotion winning seasons, there's times. Last season, I think around the January-February period, we kind of had a dip. So you need people who are going to stand strong when the pressure's on a little bit and come through the other side of it. And yeah, so of course building the dressing room right and getting that balance, I feel, is key for longevity throughout the course of a season.
You talked about adjustment with the spotlight being on Wrexham, and how players deal with it. If you had to adjust, do you like that exposure? Did it take a while to get used to?
Yeah, I think the first month or so with the cameras, because at the start there was a lot more kind of training ground. You know, they're at the training ground a lot. Now they've seen us enough at the training ground, so
they go somewhere else.
Yeah, they venture around the area. No, so at first, yeah, of course, it's a bit like, you know, this is different. But the most important thing is that, you know, myself and Steve Parkin, we built up a great relationship with the producers of the documentary, and there's an element of trust there, because, you know, we decided just to be ourselves and just get on with it, and trust the producers and everybody involved to tell the story, and they've done a great job. You know, the documentary has been hugely successful, which is the skill of the people behind the scenes, but it's also because of the success and the drama the team's created over the last few years.
It's a real thing though now, isn't it? I mean, 10, 20 years ago it would never have happened, but different clubs, different crews, and something at the start of every season or at the end comes out.
Yeah, that's a good point, that you kind of, not most teams, but a lot of teams have got some sort of documentary. And you know, when you go for a job now as a manager, whether a young manager or an experienced manager, it's part and parcel, and you've got to learn to deal with that. And yeah, but we've enjoyed that as well. And you know, when we went to the USA in the last 2 summers, and it's seeing the popularity of the club over there, you've almost got to be there to understand that, and also getting to know the producers over in LA for the documentary and get their understanding of their story of building an Emmy Award winning documentary and the success it's brought them. So there's a lot of factors have gone into play to make it successful. It's been done very skillfully, and it's very authentic. I think that's why it's been popular, because you know, it's not guarded at all. It's telling the story as it is, and so far they've done that well, and the team has responded well. I
just wondered what, like, your colleagues, you know, throughout the leagues, and the contacts that you have and the managers that you've been involved with in the past and now, who you know, your opponents, what do they make of it all? Is that when you're coming up against, is it always like just polite conversation, or do you think they kind of look at you differently?
No, I think after the game, sometimes when we're having a drink with the opposition manager, which we still do, which is everyone knows.
It doesn't happen very often. Not in the Premier League. That
no,
doesn't happen.
Not in the Premier League. But yeah, no, it's tradition, you know, home and away, to invite the opposition staff in. So they'll always have a chat with us and say, "How are you finding it? How are you finding it?" etc., and picking our brains on what it's been like, because it is different. You know, when, you know, we're looking to sign players. I've been speaking to a player today about bringing him to the club, and just talking to him about, you know, this is a different club to be at the moment because of the documentary and, you know, our owners and the ambition, and you know, it's a very exciting place to be.
That should be. Is that like a key part of it though? I always remember Chris Wilder saying, you know, when you speak to a player, you kind of know if they want to play for you straight away. Do you get that with the players that you speak to, that they want to come straight away? Do they have to think about making that decision? Or is that part of the attraction of coming to Wrexham?
You know, this year, particularly the players we've gone for, you know, we've been competing with clubs with also great histories, you know, and big clubs in this division, and bottom end championship clubs. So it's been tougher to get players. Not that they don't want to come here, but there's always other options. But yeah, I like to have a good sit down with players and explain to them about the club. Now, obviously, when I first came here, that I knew about the documentary and where the club was going, but I had to sell the vision because it was at the early stages. But since then, the Wrexham story is out there, so a lot of players I speak to will have done the homework and know a lot about the club before we have that meeting. So the fact that they're at the meeting when we're talking about the football side of it tells me that they're really interested.
How does this then compare to when, for example, the memories that you've created so far here and the celebrations that you've had and the cup final against Swansea? I was pitch side, I vividly remember you walking with the team out Bradford, you'd beaten Arsenal, you'd beaten Aston Villa to get there, those sort of big cup upsets, and then the whole visualisation that greeted you as you came out with the flags and the banners on the right-hand side as you were looking to the pitch. How do those moments compare, or can you compare them to what you've had here? Because those are moments that stick with you forever.
Oh, without doubt. I think the Bradford story for me and Steve is similar, because we took over Bradford City when they were in relegation trouble at the start of a season, and we had to rebuild the club back up. And you know, Bradford is a great city, well supported club, and to see that area lifted by the success of the football team was absolutely fantastic. And I'll never forget the memories we had at Bradford. You know, the cup upsets, the Wembley appearance, the playoff final victory. And building that club up, and there's a lot of similarities really in terms of the stature of the club and the potential and the passion of the supporters behind their team.
But then when you look at the other flip side of what you've had to deal with, Bolton, everyone talks about the job you did at Bolton, but the difficulties that you had to go through there just to keep that club where it is and put it in a position that it was so close to going under. So you had to keep that ticking over. Yeah,
very, very tough times at Bolton, you know, and very proud of that period in a strange way, because you know, that club was so close to going out of business, and for a club with the history of Bolton Wanderers to no longer be in existence would have been a travesty. But it did happen to Bury, you know, in the same season. Bury, a club I played for, and both clubs were in similar situations at the time, and we made by the fingertips able to play my part and Steve's part in keeping everything going, and until Sharon Britton bought Bolton. And you know, I was so pleased that they got such a great owner, because the club deserved someone like Sharon to run the club. And but yeah, it was talk about a roller coaster. I think the Bolton experience certainly kind of comes into that category, because when the players don't get paid for 5 months,
they come to you.
Yeah, and you know, having to get the players and the team motivated to compete in the championship when the staff and the players aren't getting paid. And you know, they were tough times, but they make you stronger. And you know, I've got a lot of respect for the people at Bolton, because always behind the scenes at football clubs, there's people who've been there for years, who are the lifeblood of the club, who play their part, as we've got here. You know, we've had it here through the tough times. There's a lot of people I've got to know behind the scenes who've played the part and make sure there is a Wrexham Football Club and there is a Bolton Wanderers, and so pleasing for those people here now at Wrexham to see the team's success.
But I also think from a wider picture that perhaps that there isn't that understanding of how exhausting sometimes being a manager can be.
Yeah, it's all encompassing. I think that's absolutely, you know, key. You know, you need good family to be a manager, an understanding family, because you might be with your wife, but you might not be focusing on what she's saying, which will probably kill me when she hears this. But you're always thinking, especially in the transfer window as well, because you know, everybody wants to improve the squad. It's competitive to get players in you want, and you know, we were just talking about this morning as a staff. You know, we've had a couple of decisions to make, and every decision is a tight one. It's never completely obvious who you should go for, or completely obvious you should pay that extra. It's always tight calls have got to be made, and as well as preparing for games, that puts a lot of onus on the manager and the staff. But the great thing here, you know, we've got so many good people, you know, above us who are very experienced football operators, and it's been great to lean on those people.
But it's a different kind of exhaustion, maybe, perhaps, or the way you look at it, because of the scrutiny in these moments that you're under, because you're doing the best. It may look like everything is brilliant here at Wrexham, and it is, but you've also got to make sure that it's the right decisions that you're making.
Yeah, exactly. And you know, the onus is on us to make those calls. And We're at a unique position really, because obviously we've got to do everything we can to try and achieve that third promotion.
Which is ultimately what's the most important thing is.
Yeah, exactly, because this chance won't come along again for a club to achieve third promotion. But we knew when we came into the division how competitive it was. You know, a couple of weeks ago, people were saying, "Oh, it's us, Wycombe and Birmingham," and I was saying, "Don't be discounting other teams, because there's so much of the season to play for." Huddersfield have spent big in this transfer window already, and I'd imagine they've got more business to do. So it's very competitive, but we find ourselves in a position, and we give ourselves a great chance and a platform. So, of course, like we say, the transfer window is important to make the right decisions, and sometimes those decisions may not be to do as much as people on the outside would think you would be doing, and have an understanding that we've got players who've come back from injury. We've got Jack Marriott, who scored 5 goals in the opening 7 or 8 games. He's now back from injury, so that's like having a new sign for us. So we've got to factor Jack now back into the equation as well.
And just, I'm smiling because when you say like that's ultimately what you've got to do, and you mentioned there Wycombe, who you're up against as well, and Birmingham are there as well, and you and Birmingham obviously have, you know, the stardust sprinkled all over you, but the likes of Wycombe and Huddersfield, they're as competitive as you are, but without that backing that they have. So it goes to show it's quite level.
Yeah, without doubt. You look at some of the teams in the division.
Just because you've got who you've got doesn't
no,
mean
without doubt.
Doesn't mean anything.
Well, this division, everybody said this year is probably the most competitive it's been for years, and obviously we've already mentioned Bolton, you know, losing playoff finalists last year. Charlton, obviously not probably having the first half of the season they wanted, but a huge club at this level. Barnsley always in and around the playoffs, and the list goes on. And then on top of that, you get a Wycombe who've probably overachieved, made some really intelligent decisions in terms of their recruitment, and find themselves up there. And when you're up there at this stage of the season, you deserve to be. So absolute serious contenders, and got some really good players. So yeah, that's what football's all about. It's really competitive, but we're enjoying competing at this level. And you know, said to the lads earlier that, you know, we've worked so hard as a group to get to nights like Thursday when we're playing Birmingham City, and we talked of, you know, alongside the clubs like Birmingham who've been a Premiership club. You know, 2-3 years ago we were competing in the National League at Aldershot away and Boreham Wood and grounds like that. Now we're going to Birmingham early in the season in front of nearly 30,000 people. So we've come a long way quickly. But it doesn't mean we're not ambitious to take that next step.
Can I ask, the emotional connection that you've had with all the clubs that you've been involved with, would this be one of the strongest? Oh,
without doubt, because you know, the emotion of when we got promoted out the National League, you know, I can remember seeing the supporters' faces, like it was just incredible. I remember leading up to that game, you know, bumping into supporters and them telling me their journey as a Wrexham fan. Everyone was telling me their story, and you know, at times, yeah, I had to kind of go, I need to take myself away from this to keep my focus. But yeah, the sheer joy, emotion on people's faces when we got out of the National League, because well, you've got to remember that the club had a lot of near misses as well, and because Notts County ran us so close, you know, we had to get 111 points to win the league, which is incredible when you look back. But when you've been so close, and you've been followed the team through those years, you think, oh, here we go again. You know, supporters said to me, it's the same as when Jamie Vardy scored all the goals for Fleetwood. Now Langstaff scoring all the goals for Notts County. It's going to happen to us again. And you have to kind of put those negative kind of thoughts out your mind. But you could feel the tension. Honestly, the day we went up, the tension in this ground was something I can still feel now.
And on the owner's side of things, we hear of takeovers and investment comes in across all the English league, you know, Premier League obviously, but filtering down the lower leagues as well. But they seem to have that emotional connection as well. You kind of feel they're going to be here for an awful long time, maybe forever.
Well, I think they've enjoyed the story so far. They've completely bought into they love watching the team if they're not here, obviously, which is difficult because of the work commitments. They're watching every game over in the USA. And yeah, I think them, and not just them, their families as well, because it impacts your families when you own a football club. So they've really enjoyed it, and they're really determined to kind of set out to do what they promised at the start. And
which would be incredible.
Yeah, I think but not just the football side, but lifting the area. I think that's been the key, and raising the profile of the club, and they've certainly done that.
Well, the one thing, Phil, you you celebrate it well when it does happen.
Without doubt. Listen, I think in football, when promotions are hard to come by, you know, it really is a marathon season. And like I said, even in promotion winning seasons, and you know, when I've done interviews before for managers' jobs, I always say to people that just remember, even in seasons when I've been promoted, either player or manager, there's times where it doesn't go well, and that's when you need support. That's when you need people around you to support you, supporters to kind of understand the overall picture. Because it's because we had that season where we got 111 points, it was almost like it's the norm, we're going to win nearly every week. But obviously as you go up the leagues, it becomes more and more competitive. But yeah, so far we're doing well, and like I said, when you do get promotion, it's important to celebrate, because it's a group of people coming together, not just on the pitch, off the pitch, and in the stands as well.
We wish you well for the rest of the season. Thank you.